Hi, my name is Cameron, and I apologize for the sort of informal background. I'm moving, hence the boxes, so just disregard that. But my intended audience for this presentation was actually my mom and my boyfriend, which is very attainable and safe, but the only time I could really find to do this presentation with finals and everything else was late at night, so they are sleeping, unfortunately. But my plan is to present this to you as I would have presented it to them. So I intend on maintaining a pretty casual tone and kind of communicating it in the way that I would communicate it to my loved ones. So, to get started, for this project I created this painting, and I think it's important to emphasize that for the paper in this project I decided to define and think of language in three ways. So instead of creating kind of a whole definition, I thought that it was best to pick three different definitions and kind of define language according to the three concepts that we picked in the beginning and kind of create a whole image of language based on that. So instead of creating a singular definition for language, I'm incorporating the three definitions that I chose. So for this painting, I first sketched it out, and I then filled it in with mixing colors and acrylic paints. So those are the materials used. And then, alright, let's get to it. Let's get to how I kind of interpreted language through this painting. So the first concept that I utilized in my paper for this project was psycholinguistics, which I portray here with the brain. So I wanted to incorporate psycholinguistics in my definition of language because I really wanted to emphasize how complex the production of language is. So regardless of the modality, in order to communicate like just one word, a multi-step process needs to take place. And I didn't really realize how quite complex this is until I learned it in this class. So I really wanted to emphasize how kind of amazing the human brain is and how much it's involved in language. I'm a psychology major, so I thought that it was really important and really interesting how much the brain kind of is part of language. So that's why I included that part. The next part that I kind of focused on is language variation and identity. And I thought that the best creative way to portray this is via, like, kind of communicating the tone that language can vary. I acknowledge that I kind of only emphasize oral auditory modality in terms of variation, and that there are definitely a bunch of different other modalities that take place. So I just want to convey my understanding of that and recognize the limitations of this painting in that respect. But, so, first I decided to kind of portray the power that language can have depending on the sentence structure that you use, the vocabulary that you use. It can kind of create this kind of thunderous effect. I think of extremely famous political figures that have kind of moved people with their words and the power in their words. The next, with these flowers here, the next thing I wanted to communicate was kind of like the romantic, the persuading aspects of language. So I think of love songs, I think of music in general, and how the tone of your words can be persuasive or can communicate love and can be used to connect with other people. Lastly, I think of kind of like, with these red lines, kind of like an angry or demanding tone. And I thought that this was important to recognize because language can be used to hurt as well as help, so I thought that that was important to include. The last kind of definition that I used was language and power. So I portrayed this by kind of putting this slightly awkward floating, maybe godlike head above all these other people or human-seeming figures. And this is part of my paper that I really emphasized and kind of probably hit home most for me. Language and power is seen every day through pretty much everything: societal structures, family structures, and I think it's extremely important to point out, especially in the current social and civil climate. Especially in America, ever since I've kind of gotten into college, I've kind of thought about our nation in different ways. And thinking about it in terms of language and how kind of unevenly it's distributed has really opened my eyes to different and more, unfortunately, injustices. So the point that I kind of hit home or kind of used in my paper was that if you don't speak or communicate in the way that's mainstream in this nation, which is English, and using, if you have the privilege of being able to talk and being able to hear, then you're kind of out of luck in terms of accessibility. If your main language is, or your primary language isn't English, then this nation is automatically more inaccessible to you. If you're deaf or mute and you don't communicate that way, just things are automatically harder, and I don't think that's fair. So I really wanted to emphasize how minority groups in terms of communication are affected in this nation. So that's kind of how I use this kind of demanding presence of the speaking person over people that you don't really know their identity. So that's really probably one of my, my favorite definition that I chose. I had the most fun writing about it, and I really wanted that to be kind of what pretty much the most powerful message that I communicated in this painting, and I think that I achieved that. So this is my painting, and that's how I interpreted language in terms of this artistic medium, and I want to express my gratitude for having this type of opportunity to express my creativity. Instead of just slapping things on a PowerPoint, I got to use my brain in a different way and really relax and kind of exercise my limited artistic ability in creating this, and I had a lot of fun. And thank you for this semester. I learned a lot about linguistics that I didn't know before, and I am thankful for all your guidance in this course. And yeah, thank you. That's it for me.